Hey everybody, Jake here with TrendSpider to go over the midweek video. Today we're going to take a look at quite a few stocks, starting with SPY as always. And what I've done here, and I haven't really changed the chart too much since really this week, last weekend, but what we have here is we have the volume by price starting at the beginning of the year. So generally, remember, we were anchoring it from this high point, but another way to also anchor is from the year to date, month to date, week to date. There's all different types of ways to anchor. So this is one way to do it using a date type of approach. And so what you can see here, since this particular point in time, I mean, literally, we hit this supply zone perfectly and rejected right off of it. And so now, as we're kind of trying to figure out where we're going, we do have a huge gap below. We do have the Alphatrends anchored VWAP starting from the May 14th kind of low here, where we did have a nice bounce. And so what you can see is if we did start to move down, notice we do have a little bit of a volume area here that is in confluence with this Alphatrends anchored VWAP. So if this did move down, I would expect maybe this area to be a place where buyers did possibly come into the picture. Now, is that for sure? No, definitely not. Anything can happen here. I mean, the chances of it happening tomorrow with possible jobs numbers coming out, I don't see it going higher. Who knows? But I have no idea. My opinion really doesn't matter. It's what the market does. So just looking at the levels, we do have this really, really strong level of supply above and really not much going on here below. So we had the volume gap above. Now we have the volume gap below as well, and so we'll have to see if this moves down as quick as it moved up through this zone. So going on to the next one, we have the Qs. The Qs are one that I want to go over the raindrop because this is really how we were able to tell that tech really had some strength into last weekend when we had this breakout through previous highs, and you can see in all three of these raindrops, we have had buyers at the top of this range showing conviction and absorbing that supply near the top of the range. And notice how we've just continued to melt up essentially. So, when does this stop? Who knows? But we've pretty much melted up from 230 all the way to 246. It would be actually healthy for the price to move back down to possibly retest this resistance area. And we'll just have to see what happens. Clearly, the second wave narrative is coming back into the media. And we'll just have to see how much that spooks people. But at the end of the day, there's still so much liquidity in the out there that it's really hard for money to go anywhere else. I mean, right now you can probably get a higher return on a dividend play in the market than you can on a fixed income vehicle, and that's why people are pretty much forced to put their money in the market. Going into VIX, this is one that I definitely am watching simply because we do have pretty much a perfect test of that resistance zone today. But the question is, does it continue up? As bearish as today looked and as bearish as it looks after hours, just remember that there's always some tricks that are played, especially on Thursdays and Fridays, as we've seen probably the last pretty much 8 weeks at this point. So the fact is we are at an important area of resistance on VIX, and this will be a crucial area to break to the upside if this did happen to break out tomorrow. Going into the next one, we have Microsoft, which is very similar to what we mentioned on the Qs, but essentially over the last few days we've had that huge ascending triangle breakout. You can see when we did break out, we did have those buyers really having conviction here at the top of the range. That means that anybody who was selling, it was absorbed by buyers at the top of the range, showing that there was conviction, and we just pretty much have melted up here as well. So obviously with Microsoft a big component of the Qs, that is why these look very similar, but just another example of raindrops showing buyers in control. Moving on to Tesla, this is a really cool example of essentially being able to use the volume by price to figure out where these people are holding since X period in time. So in this case, I want to say since February 19th, where are a majority of the shares holding? And so if I see this from this perspective, we can see there was a massive volume shelf forming here, which essentially created a launch pad for price. And then if you anchor that volume weighted average price from this May 1st low, you can see how well this acted in together as confluence before just gapping up and just going from there. So into tomorrow, I mean, if we were to kind of try to figure out where this is going, the only way you can really get an idea is using these fib levels at this point. So, is Tesla ready for 1300? That would be absolutely nuts, but you know, crazier things have happened with Tesla. So if I did want to go and create an alert at this line, let's say that I don't necessarily want to be alerted right when it hits this area, I can go and say, all right, alert me when we fire within $42.52 of this line or this fib level, and then I'll be able to be alerted. So whenever the 10-minute candle closes anywhere within this purple area, I'll get an alert on my phone and my email. So this says, that's a ton of room to move up. But at this point, there's really no other areas of resistance above. So using that 1.618 extension does come in handy here. Moving on, we have GE. GE was a cool case study simply by looking at the Alphatrends anchored VWAP from this point in time on February 12th where we topped out. Notice something very interesting. Every time we've had a blue raindrop on this anchored VWAP, notice what happens. Not all the time, but notice here, this was a really fun play. We had the blue raindrop on the anchored VWAP and just continuation up. We now have a blue raindrop on the anchored VWAP again. We'll just have to see if that pulls the same type of move as before. But with the markets looking a little iffy into tomorrow, at least after hours, as I mentioned, that can change very easily in the morning. This is something to keep in mind and just showing how well price is respecting this February 12th anchored VWAP. So that is a really cool example, but moving on to SHOP, this is one that is actually holding ridiculously well. And remember, this one has done very well during the coronavirus. So if a second wave kind of comes back into the narrative, it wouldn't be shocking to see that this possibly actually going higher just based on how big this volume base is forming. So remember, the volume base is telling us since the March 18th low, where are a majority of shares holding? And we know by this huge area here that a majority of people are holding from around 700 to around 775. And so if supply starts to dry up, if demand increases at all, that's going to drive the price up. And remember, you don't always have to have an increase in supply, an increase in demand for the price to move up. You can simply just have a decrease in supply and demand remains constant, and you'll actually have a move up as well if you look at the supply and demand curves. Pretty fascinating how that works. Going into the last one, Walmart. This is one that almost looks identical to CHWY, and so I guess we will go over CHWY as well just to show you guys the example here. But essentially what I've done here, same thing, anchored the volume by price from this March 16th low. What we can see here is a ton of volume starting to accumulate here, and we are pretty much bouncing right off of that Alphatrends anchored VWAP from the March 16th low as well. And I do have a sensitivity alert set above in case this does move up to test this area. Now, as I mentioned, this looks very similar to CHWY a couple weeks ago. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean it's going to do exactly what CHWY did, but let's take a look at CHWY and see what happened after that. So if we do this, anchor the volume by price and the anchored VWAP from this March 12th low, look what happened here. We pretty much bounced right off of this anchored VWAP. There was a volume shelf above, and then the price moved up very, very quickly. So is that going to happen exactly like will that happen on Walmart like it did on CHWY? Probably not exactly, and maybe it doesn't even happen that way. But we can't ignore that the setup is almost identical. So that is one that's interesting into tomorrow, Walmart. And hopefully this video was helpful to get an idea of kind of what the market looks like into the second half of the week and how to use TrendSpider to take advantage of it. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to comment below. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe, and we will be posting more videos over the weekend. Thanks so much and have a great evening.